By now, most leaders can sense it. Performance feels harder to sustain. Momentum is inconsistent. Effort is high, but outcomes don't quite match. And when that happens, there's a familiar reflex. Leaders reach for motivation, more urgency, more engagement language, more encouragement, more energy. Before we go any further, let's get clear on what leaders actually usually mean when they say motivation. They're not talking about purpose in the abstract. They're usually talking about visible effort, such as participation, responsiveness, energy in meetings, attendance, compliance with goals, initiatives, and timelines. Motivation becomes shorthand for, I need to see people trying harder. And that's where the misdiagnosis begins. Because most performance problems are not motivation problems. They're system problems that motivation has been asked to compensate for. Let's clarify what performance problem actually is. A performance problem is not a lack of effort. It's when effort does not reliably convert to outcomes. People are busy, people are committed, but results stall, fluctuate, or decay under pressure. That gap, the one between effort and outcome, is the signal. And when leaders misread that signal as a motivation issue, they apply pressure where clarity is needed instead. So why does motivation become the go-to explanation? Not because leaders are careless, but because motivation is visible. You can see engagement, you can measure participation, you can feel the urgency in the room. However, systems are harder to see. Structural friction doesn't announce itself. Misalignment hides behind activity. Decision confusion looks like hesitation. And motivation also feels faster, while diagnosing system takes time. It introduces uncertainty, and sometimes it implicates leadership decisions that are uncomfortable to revisit. Motivation preserves momentum, at least on the surface. And there's one more reason motivation is so appealing. It protects the leader's story. If performance is a motivation problem, then the strategy stays intact, the structure remains unquestioned, and the issue stays with the people, right? And that's only human, and that's okay. However, it is also risky. But motivation is often used to compensate for what the system is making unnecessarily hard. Let's talk about misalignment. Another word leaders use constantly, often without precision. Misalignment is not about values, posters, or cultural sentiment. Operationally, misalignment shows up as competing priorities, unclear decision rights, incentives pointing one way while expectations point another, or success criteria that shift faster than the teams can recalibrate. So people aren't confused because they don't care. They're confused because the system sends mixed signals. And motivation cannot resolve the contradiction. You can't energize people into clarity. And I'll say that again. You cannot energize people into clarity. So here's what typically happens when leaders assume motivation is the issue. They increase the urgency, they escalate accountability, they add incentives, and reinforce goals. But pressure doesn't fix misalignment. Pressure amplifies whatever the system already rewards. So for example, if clarity is missing, pressure creates anxiety. If priorities conflict, then pressure creates avoidance. And if decisions are ambiguous, pressure creates risk aversion. And slowly, capable people stop extending or expending discretionary energy, not because they don't care, but because they're protecting themselves from wasted effort. This is how motivation tactics quietly makes performance worse. Pressure doesn't make people better decision makers, it makes them more consistent with the system they're already in. So when leaders apply pressure, they don't change behavior, they amplify whatever the system already rewards. This is especially visible right now. January is a season of resets. Goals are renewed, budgets are activated, and training is heavily incentivized. Training becomes the preferred motivation tactic, not always because skills are missing, but because momentum feels fragile. Training signals action. It reinforces commitment. It helps leaders feel like they are preventing the February fallout. But here's the diagnostic distinction. Training is often used to restore energy, not redesign systems. It's a motivation intervention masquerading as development. And when training is layered onto misaligned systems, People leave inspired, but then they re-enter the same constraints. The system doesn't change, only the expectation to endure it does. This is where leaders often get misled because motivation tactics appear to work. High compliancers respond well. They attend the training, they adopt the language, they follow through visibly, they maintain the appearance of alignment. But compliance is not performance. High performers, on the other hand, behave differently. They notice misalignment earlier. They slow down when the system stops making sense. They resist expending effort where outcomes feel disconnected. And because they don't perform with enthusiasm on command, they're often mislabeled as disengaged. But here's the uncomfortable truth. High compliancers make motivation strategies look effective even when performance doesn't improve, while high performers surface the real problem and often pay the price for it. So the question leaders keep asking is, well, how do we motivate people more? But that question assumes that the system within the organization is already sound. A more diagnostic question is quieter and harder. The question is, what is the system making harder than it needs to be? Another question, where are decisions unclear? Where are priorities competing? And where does effort fail to translate into progress? Because performance is not a personality trait. It's a relationship between people and the environments they operate inside. So most organizations don't have a motivation problem, believe it or not. They have a design problem that keeps asking people to power through. And the longer motivation is used to compensate for misalignment, the harder performance becomes to sustain. Not because people stop caring, but because the system stopped making sense. So if performance feels heavier than it should, if effort keeps rising while outcomes stall, the risk isn't that people lack motivation. The risk is that action is happening without diagnosis. And that's the misalignment most organizations never name. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know your insights and thoughts down below. I would love to hear what's going on with your organizations. And be sure to subscribe to this channel as we take a different approach. And until next time, I will see you on the other side. Bye for now.